Hello everyone, welcome to Bootcamp. In today's session, we'll be building the SpaceX application with React, TypeScript, and GraphQL. Do you guys want to add anything?
Just wanted to add that after this, we are going to cover Redux. And after Redux, we are going to cover Storybook. And after Storybook, we are going to start off with Jamstack and serverless, a combination of Jamstack and serverless. The whole idea is that we are able to develop highly scalable, awesomely fast web apps and web applications. That is the whole point, that they should be extremely fast. By fast, I mean the client should be able to load it right away with minimum delay, and the responsiveness of the website and app should be very high. And at the same time, it should be scalable, that if you increase the number of users, it should not decrease the response time. And with the latest state-of-the-art technologies, we are going to work together, and we are also help all of you make a lot of money. Hopefully, God's will. Okay, let's start. Let's start.
Okay. All right, here we go. So let's open up terminal. So let's start with building a repository. So let's go to Documents, GitHub, and let's create our project. We can do npx create create React app, and we'll call it SpaceX TypeScript. Oh, sorry. No more capital letters. That won't work either, right? Because X is still capital.
Today is the last date which we covered GraphQL.
Next time is Redux, right?
Yes. And Zeeshan is going to start off. His command over Redux is quite marvelous. Awesome.
It works well.
Zeeshan, how long have you been working with Redux, Zeeshan?
Maybe around more than 5 years or 4 years, maybe. I didn't calculate it exactly, but That's how it,
Basically, since
4 or
it
5
came
years.
out.
Yeah, because we were working on the Angular initially, and
Yeah.
after Angular 1, they did a big gap in Angular 2, and React
Mhm.
captured the market meanwhile. So initially, we were working from then on the React and with the Redux. So I didn't remember when we started learning React, but it must be around 3 to 4 years, maybe.
Yeah. This is almost done. Okay. So
Zeeshan,
project.
Have you made a lot of money on with Redux?
React and Redux we have done a lot of money actually. Mainly because most of my project was on React. Before that, I was working on Angular. So still,
Uh-huh.
we can have a project with Angular, but React is now GraphQL. There are a lot of projects on Upwork and
Uh-huh.
Fiverr as well about related to the GraphQL. So they asked you to create application with client side is React with the GraphQL and server with the GraphQL. So this is the main new requirement, and there is a lot of requirement for this.
I was surprised that so many people are also using Storyboard.
I haven't explored it yet. I need to see it in detail.
Okay.
A lot of them on the UX side are using it. I think
Yes.
in the freelancing side of things, the
Mm.
UX generally somebody else is doing.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Mhm.
so
Yes.
that's probably what. So okay, so we've installed GraphQL here, and let's add Apollo client. Okay, so that's done, and then let's add the code generator CLI. So yarn add GraphQL code gen CLI. This was nice because it generates out all the types.
You mean all the objects that are coming over the net?
Yeah.
It basically creates the JavaScript objects for you.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about the typing because you actually the server define the schema
Yeah.
what actually being coming, and we need to define types on the server, and that's in the GraphQL script inside the GraphQL string for the client. Because we are working with the TypeScript, so we need for each object we need a TypeScript object, so it generates for that for us.
Yeah. Okay. So let's try and set this up. Yarn GraphQL code gen and init. All right. So then it asks you a couple of questions. So we have to go through this. First one, we're just building a application with React. So
Mhm.
it's checked here. Then it asks you for your where is the schema. So we have our schema online. We're using the SpaceX schema. So we just type in that URL HTTPS. Um, spacexdata.herokuapp.com/GraphQL. That's our schema.
In case we are building our own server, then we should have our server working first.
Yeah. Okay, then we're going to be asked where are the operations and fragments. So since we're working with TypeScript, we have to give a different pattern here instead of this GraphQL. So we will give this the source components and some wildcards here, and the file extension is going to be TypeScript or this. And then it says which plugins we need. So we're just going to leave these three that are already highlighted, the default values. So TypeScript operations, and then TypeScript React Apollo. So we just hit enter. And then it says, where do we want the output? So this just like a location where the GraphQL file will be generated. So this is fine. And then we don't want the introspection file. And then the Codegen file, we'll leave it as it is. And then what script? So this is going to be Codegen. And now we have the code generator working. So let's go to our project. Let's open it up in VS Code. So here we go. And then in the Codegen file, we can see it's been created here. We have to add the how we're gonna get the React hooks. So we can here add config with hooks. That. And now let's go and I can close this. And in our browser, let's go and see the actual SpaceX data.heroku. This one. So this gives us access to close out of these. This gives us access to like a playground where we can create some GraphQL queries and run them against the SpaceX server. So the app we're trying to build today is going to be a UI that shows all of the different launches that SpaceX has done, plus the ones they have planned coming up in the future. So those would all be listed, and then if you click on one of them, you get some additional details on that mission. So if we want to look at the actual all of the data, it's SpaceX API.spacex.land. If you go here, you'll have access to the whole schema. You can see everything. You can also build the query here. So there's two options. So what we're looking at, this is everything. If we want to get all the data regarding the different missions and what launches happen, so we get the launches object here, and then inside of it we have access to a few different pieces of information. So we can get ID, we can get like the launch date, the launch site, these are, you could have like a direct value, or you could have another object. So if you get the like the launch site, you can get the name of where it launched from. So if you run this, it'll give you all the different SpaceX launches and where they launched from, the launch site. And then we can get if it was a successful launch. So you see some of them were successful and then some were not successful. We can get the launch year, we can get the mission name and ID. Something like this. There we go. So we don't really need the mission ID. I think we can get rid of it. We don't need the. I like having the launch success there. We don't really need launch site here. So let's see again. Just have something that's more clean. I think this is enough. So this gives us some data that we can use initially to show like which launches we're showing. Like so here all the data is here. So all the launches that have ever happened. And I think if you have access to some of the ones that haven't actually taken off yet. Yeah, so see, like the ones that haven't actually happened yet, it's shown null for launch success. So for that, you can, I think you have to get the upcoming, and let's also get is tentative. So upcoming is false, so it means it's already happened because you also have the launch success. So if we find one of those again, yeah, so see, like mission ID 105 hasn't happened yet, so it's an upcoming mission, so it's true. It's not tentative, so it's on schedule this year, and then the launch success will be provided true or false once the mission actually happens. So this is just some data that we can get regarding the launch. So this we can use for our first query. So on our UI, we will have two components. One component will be a list of all the different launches, which will be kind of like this, but more nice to look at. And then the other component will be if you click on, for example, mission number 13, that it will give you some additional information. And then for that, we can have they have some images inside the links. So they have some images, they have videos, they might have some articles. So we can play around and get some different data to show for each flight. But this is, we can probably get rid of is tentative and then just keep these values for our main list, and then the remaining things that we want to get for the details, we can show them in a separate component like that. So okay, so this would be our first query, and so you could either use the Graph IQ Explorer here, and then, or you could go to the playground, and then you could have a similar. You can write the query, and then give it a name, and it basically you give it these. Oh, what did I miss? Interesting. Are these different launches? Anyway, so I wanted to get the flight number, the mission name, and the launch year from here. And then this would give you the different missions and all there. The ID and the year of the launch. So we can use these. What else do we have here? Success. Okay, so that's it. So that's all of our data, and this is our query that we'll actually be using. And then, so let's write the other query. So this is the one for our main component, and then we need another query that we can run, which will be used for the actual details. And then, so that query, give a name, we can call it launch info. And then, so when we query a particular launch, we have to look it up by that ID. So if, for example, that's looking at this object, and then you have all these different information available, but then you only want it for each object. So we want to query a particular ID. So we'll create a variable here for ID, and it'll be a string. Inside this query, we'll query the launch object, and then we'll give it the ID of whichever the variable. And then inside of that object, we have access to all of the extra information that we might want to use. Mission name, the launch year, the success, and we can get some details there. We can get the detail about the launch site. And then inside of the launch site, we have access to the site name, where it launched from. And then if you want to get information about the actual rocket that they used, so we can get the name of the rocket. They also have the type of the rocket. So that, and then we can get access to the media kind of stuff. So they have a video link, and they have some images. They're stored on Flickr. So something like this. And this will have an error because we're using an ID variable. So we should create a query variable here. And then inside of it, we can create this ID variable and give it a value. So maybe mission 100.
There was a number 13, Friday the 13th.
What's that?
We are not sure if there is 100 number. I think I remember 1313 number.
For the mission? We can, when I was using, there is up to 115 or something. What's wrong here?
Mm-hmm.
The string launch ID, flight number, mission name. Invalid, you cannot represent it. Oh, I need to give this should be a string, right? There you go. And we'll just go with 13 now that we're using it. Okay. So that's our two queries. One for all the different missions, and one that will give the details on one particular mission given the ID. Now let's go back into our project here, and inside, once we're here, we can start building out our components. Let's start up the app as well. Let's leave that running. Okay, so let's go and start working on creating the components. So we'll create a folder here for components. And then inside, so we have to create two components, one for the launch and then one for the details. So launch and launch details. Now inside of our launch folder, we should create some files here. So we'll need our query.ts file where we'll use our GraphQL query that we just created. So let's just create the other files while we're here. We also need the launch.tsx for this component, and then we also need a style.css, and we need index.tsx. So these are now created, and then let's update the query.ts file, and we can get the code we just created for our launches, and we need to get it here. But first, let's import the GraphQL from GraphQL tag, and then here we'll do our export const, and then here we'll create a query for our launches. I'll just call it launch. And this is a GraphQL query. Paste our query here, and then close it. So that's our first query for our first component. And then let's do the same thing with the other query that we've written. So for launch details, we need to create the files again. So index.ts. And then launch details.tsx and query.ts, and then style.css. So those are the files, and then inside the query.ts, let's add the second query. So let's import GraphQL from GraphQL tag, and then export const, and then create a new query launch details. And this will be GraphQL and let's get the data from here. That. Okay, so now we have both of our queries. Let's close through here. And now let's generate our TypeScript interfaces. Clear. Okay, so here we can just run yard codegen. Hopefully this doesn't give an error. Yeah, okay, so this happened to me before. I have to add one of these, this one. then what I did, yarn add so here I think we should just pick the most recent one. I think it's this one. So, okay, let's try it again. So yarn Codegen again. So it's trying to access the SpaceX schema, passed it, and then it did generate the output this time. And we can see it if we go to our project. And when we did the setup, we asked it to create the file in a folder called generated. So here we go. It has all of our types here. Everything from the server has been exported here. We can easily access anything we need in our application now. Okay. And then also, if you look at this, towards the end, you can see the different the ones that we have specified. So this was our second one. So launch info document here. So use launches query is one of our functions that have been defined here, and then the other one is here, launch info query. So launches query and then launch info query is the ones that it's created for us based on our queries that we've defined in the in these two files here, query.ts. So these have been taken in by the Codegen, and then it generates all the code that we need to fetch the data from the SpaceX GraphQL server. Okay, so now with that done, let's go ahead and start working on the UI. Okay, we can start with our index.typescript here. And so what we want to do here is initialize the Apollo client and use the Apollo provider. So we can add our client to the React context. So inside of here, first we want to import the dependencies here. So let's do this here. So import, and we'll import the GraphQL, Apollo provider. There's an in-memory cache and then Apollo client from Apollo client.
In the GraphQL, there's a spelling mistake. It's GPO.
What's that?
Is there a spelling mistake here?
No, it's fine, I think. So we've imported these. Now we can initialize a new Apollo client. So let's create a constant so this will be for our client, and we're going to initialize a new Apollo client, and we'll give it the URI for our SpaceX server. So spacexdata.herokuapp.com/GraphQL. That's the URI, and cache in memory. So that's our client, and now we want to wrap the app component with the Apollo provider. So let's do the Apollo provider, and here we pass in the client we just added here. This, and the closing tag will go after the app. So now we've wrapped the app component with the Apollo provider and passed in the client. Come on. So there we go. How's this looking? Module not found. Okay. So there we go. Now let's keep going and let's start working on our components. Let's start with the launch component. This one. Let's close this one. Okay, so launch. Inside of our index.tsx. So here what we're doing is building a container component, and inside of the container will be the actual launch component. So here let's just build a simple React import from React, and then here what we have to do is import the query from the GraphQL. So let's come here. I'll use launches query.
You are looking for query object, right? Is it exported or not?
Yeah, I'm looking for this, right?
So it's already exported. Export is already mentioned.
What's that? Yeah, I'm just importing it here. Generated GraphQL. And we're going to import the launch from launch.ps. So like this. This should give an error. It's still loading. It's stuck somewhere. Can't resolve Apollo client.
At the rate.
What's that? Here, right?
Yes.
Machine performance is slowed down. I think I'll just keep going and let it catch up later. Okay, so this is probably going to be an error here because we haven't actually done the export yet. Okay, so let's create the launch container, and this is an arrow function. And then inside of this, get data from this function. And we're trying to get the, if you look at the function, use launches query. Am I looking at the right function? Yeah, there we go. So we're getting these three. We basically need to get, we can use destructuring to access these three pieces of information. So we can get the data, the error, or the loading. And then if we keep going, now we should have the data. If the data has already been fetched, if there's an error, this will be error, and then if it's still loading, it will be in the loading. So now we can handle the three different conditions here. So for example, if the data is still loading, we can just return a simple return div that says it's loading. Data is loading. And then that's that. And then if there's an error, keep going. There's multiple ways of doing it. Maybe we can say like a else if, or we can just say if error, there's an error or there's no data. Then we can return a div that says there was an error. And then if there is data, then we can return the launch component. So let's return the launch, and then we pass in the data. Data equals this data, and we pass in this as a prop to the launch component. Same with this code, and then we can export it. Now we can go to the launch.tsx file and start working on the actual UI for when the data has been fetched. So we import React from React, and we import, now we want the query. So where's the, so it should be called launches query. This one. So we import the launches query from generated GraphQL. And we'll import the styles.css. Style.css. So that. Now we can define the type for the data property that's coming in. The type is the launches query. And then we can create the actual functional
Zeeshan,
component.
I think there is some background sound coming from your mic.
Is it fine?
Yes, it is coming from your mic.
Export launch, and then this is a React functional component. Now we have to type, and then this is going to be a function here, and we pass in the data as an input, and now we can give the UI that we want to show, how we want to show the data. So here we'll create a div, give this a name, class name of launches, and then inside of the launches div we can give a heading, and then we also now we want the UI is going to have a list of all the different SpaceX launches, and we've fetched them all with the API here. This is the one we're working on. So this is a list. So we want to show it as a list, and we want to show it as a maybe an ordered list. And then here we'll give this a class name as well, so it can be styled. Call it launches ordered list. Okay. And then inside of the ordered list, now we want to map through all of the different data. So first we check to see the data is there, and then we map through the data. So a map function, sorry, that, and then inside the map function we want to provide it inputs for our function that will run inside of the map function, and then so the launch data and then the iteration, and then this is the arrow function. And once it runs for each iteration in our map, check the launch, and here we want to return the list item for our operating, the orders list, operating list. And then here we give a list item, and then each list item in our map needs a key, so it's a way to make it unique. And here we've given it a iteration, and then we give a class name for this, and it'll be launches item. So that's our list item, and then inside of the list item we can show some of the data. So when it maps through it, we have access to this information, so we can show like a combination of these things, so we can get the mission name, the year, and the success. So in our launch here we have access to this data, so we can get the mission name first, and we can say when it was launched mission. So that was the launch year, and then here we can say, maybe in the parentheses, we can say if it was a success or not. So yeah, so that's our ordered list. So it'll map through all the different items in that list, and then it'll show the name of the mission, the year of its launch, and whether or not it was successful. Um, and we just export this. Um, and then we can work on the other one, the launch details. So here, this is the one where we have to provide the details on a single launch instead of having a list of all of them. So for this one, we'll need a container and then the actual details. So here we'll build the container. So we'll import, and then we want to have the data for the details. So in here, we have a function here at the end. Which one is it? Use launch info query. So we'll import this from our GraphQL, and we'll import the launch details from details. Yep. What's this saying? Yeah, we'll use it in a minute. Okay, so now let's create the function for the container. And this is a arrow function. And just like before, when we did the destructuring to get the data for the launch component, we can do the same thing here to get the data from the launch details. So, and it's the same structure, so data, error, and loading. And we use the launch info query function. But the difference here is we have to give an ID because this one has this query running and we have to provide the ID. So for now, we can do something like this. We give variables and we provide in an ID value. And we were using 13 in our example. So that'll pick up the details. So these details will show up. Okay. Now let's add the conditional logic similar to what we did for launch. So it'll show the loading status or the error message or the actual data, depending on what's actually happening. So if there's a couple different scenarios here. So one is if the data is still loading. So if the data is loading, then you can return a div that says data is loading. There's another case where if there's an error, how do you treat that? So if there's an error, return a div saying there was an error. The other thing that could happen is there's no error, but there's no data. And that could be because you didn't really select any mission. So if no data, that means the user hasn't selected which mission they're looking for. So please select a mission for its details. That's that case. And then last is to just return the data because the user has selected submission. So we'll return the launch details component and we'll pass in the data. And then export the launch details. Okay. Yeah, so now let's create the launch details component here. So for this, again, we want to import React from React. Now we want to get access to our query. So if here we use the function that uses it. Now we want to get the actual query from the generated GraphQL. And then style.css. And then again, we want to get the type for the data property. This will be from our launch info query. Okay, and now we can create the component. So the launch details component, this is a React functional component with the properties. And again, let's gift this, let's pass in the data. And this is the arrow function. Now that the if we're rendering the launch details component, it's because we've run through all of these and the user has clicked on a mission. So if still there is no data, there's no launch data, then we return a message that says that it's not available. So like that. So that's our first div, and then we can return our actual UI that will show once the data has actually been fetched. So here we'll show the details of the actual launch. So we'll give this a class name of launch details. And then now we can add the different parts of the launch details. So first, let's add a div for the status of the flight. Launch detail status. And then inside of it, let's get the first piece of information. We just want the flight number here. So we can show flight number. So to get the number, we can access the data. Inside the data, we have the launch, and within the launch, we have access to our GraphQL object. So inside of it, we have the flight number. And let's export this. Export default launch details. And then get it to show up on our React app. So there's some issues here. Launch details, no default export. Here it is. Oh, it's still.
It seems if it says no default export, that means you need to use it in a curly braces, or you have not exported it properly in launch detail file.
You mean where I'm importing it? That's where the problem is here?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, actually, I exported the wrong thing here. I'm supposed to export this. There we go. That should be. Newer. TypeScript error.
In which launch detail index dot psx.
Is this asking me to give a curly braces? No.
No. Can you read the name of the
Launch
file where the
details. Oh,
error is?
index.psx. Yeah, this file. And it's saying import launch details. There's an error on that.
It's error on the import. So launch detail, either you need to provide curly braces if it's
It is
not
a
default
default
export.
export.
Where does it come?
Launch details and then default export.
Then it should not be an error. It has no default export. It says has
Maybe
no
if
default
I
export.
just stop this thing and try again. Sometime it happens.
Yeah, sure.
Because it was acting strangely as well. Okay, something else happened. What's it saying? Did you mean Apollo client? Did I spell it wrong? Yeah, I spelled it wrong. This is on, which file is it? Index. This one. Apollo client. Okay, so now it's compiled with warnings. Okay, it's working. Now let's go to the app component and actually get our data to show up. So app.tsx here, and get rid of everything and just rebuild this. So React, and then I want to import the two components. So import launch from components, launch, and then import the launch details from components and launch details. Yeah, let's create the app component. And then inside of the app component, let's create the div app, and inside here we'll add the launch and the launch details. export it. Export default app. Expected an assignment or function call and instead saw a function. Oh, sorry, I have to return this. Okay, so this is all the SpaceX launches that we have coming in. So the first query that we've run, so all the launches are showing up here, and then the second component. So far, we hadn't really added much here. We can do this because we have access to all the data. I just wanted to make sure. So one other thing, what I'll do is just copy some of that CSS so it just looks better. Documents, GitHub. So I just want to get some of these. Yeah, so that one, and then this one. The launch details, style sheet. Oh, also have to do the app.css. So and then the app.css has its own app.css. Okay, so the data is, so now we have all the launches, and then what we want to happen is we can click on these and then the data should update here. So let's continue building out the UI for this one. So we have all the data first. So we go back to our launch details, this one. Okay, so first we added the flight number, so we would have access to the flight number. Now we want to know, we already have, oh, interesting. How come it doesn't show the success here? I wanted to show the success there. Let's see. Launch.success.
Is it there in your AP?
Yeah.
Launch.
So in my launches, it says
Launch underscore success.
yep.
Maybe print in on console. So if is it not available in any of the mission, or it's some?
It looks like it's not there for anything. Something's weird. Let's log it.
Maybe CSS or UI issue.
I log it from here. Nothing. Oh, do I have to put this in the this?
Move it out at the function level. There is another curly bracket before the launch. Is it
Here.
intentional? In above line as well. No, it should be curly braces, but
This should have it, right? Yeah.
yes. What are the white braces? It's just round bracket.
I just wanted to have a parentheses to show the if it's a success or not.
It's null.
But it did return for some of them now. So
Yes, so
it's
you
working. It's working, but it's
have.
not showing up here. Okay. Why is that? And for none of them,
Maybe you have not explored all of them.
yeah, they're all showing up null. At least it's for 66 of them, it's true. So I mean, you should see some of them saying it's true. Considering there's only like 100 and some, half of these should be true. Um, let's run with this.
Make it JSON.stringify.
This one
Yes.
inside here, or if outside.
Yes. Inside the curly braces.
There we go.
Thanks for the Ahmed Tahir.
I think it's
I always forget to convert boolean to the string in UI.
yeah. Okay, yeah, so it's a boolean. That's why. There you go. So now it shows us whether it's been successful or not here, so you can see before you click on it. Right. So that's for our launch. Now let's go back to our launch details. Okay, so inside of here now we continue and we can add like the remaining information that we queried. So we already have if it's successful or not. Um, now let's do another thing we can add here is the name of the mission and the type of the name of the rocket, what kind of rocket it was. So let's add a here. Let's add a h1 element, and this one will say inside of here we'll add the name of the mission, mission name, and with it we'll show the type of rocket it was, or which rocket it was. Rocket, name of the rocket. Okay, so we have the name of the mission and the name of the rocket that was flying that mission. And we can add the description. So just a basic paragraph will do. And for this, we'll just say inside the paragraph, we can add in the data, launch, the details. Again, so now we have the details of the mission. What else did we query? The launch site. Where do we want to show the launch site? I'll just add another one. Launched from, and here we can add the launch site data.launch site name, and then again here I'll just add the year again. Data.launch launch here. Okay. So we have all of this. Now we can show the pictures as well. So there is some images that are there. So these images, and then there's also a video link as well. So we can try doing both. So for the pictures, we can add some images. Let's see, it's an array. So maybe we can just map through them. Let's create a div. Let's check to make sure that there is pictures. And so first you make sure that there are links, and then make sure that there are images. Then we can return a div. And inside of this div, we can map through the array. So this is an array, this one. So we want to map through them and show the different images. So first we get the images, launch.links for images, and then once we have them, we map over them, and then we provide the image as the input to our arrow function. And then inside of it, we want to display the image. So if there's an image, we give it image tag, we give so the source is, so there's a URL here. So the value of the image is a URL, so we can use that as a source. And then I think if there is no image, we'll just do null. What's wrong? Sorry. Here, we'll do null. So the pictures are there, although they're not yet formatted. Something to be worked on. And then, okay.
Adil, I think we are out of time.
We're out of
So
time.
we have
Okay.
more or less covered Zeeshan. We have covered all the points, and now the students can take it from here.
Sure.
Yes.
Well done. Marvelous
You just
job.
have to
Marvelous.
click on the link and then just update it based on that, and then maybe have the video working as well.
Great.
Marvelous. Marvelous work. Thank you, guys. See you, all of you, in the next class, and we will start Redux. Zeeshan will start teaching Redux from the next class. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you guys. See you. Bye.
Inshallah.
See you. Bye.